So I don't want to make this video. I bounced back and forth between whether or not I should write this video, whether I should finish writing this video, whether I should put together this video, whether I should publish this video. I'm sure I'll bounce back and forth on, because this is not the kind of content that I ultimately want this channel to be about. But I think this is important, and I have feelings about all this, and I feel the need to voice them. But what you should probably do is watch Corviday's video on all this first. He said a lot of things that I would say here had he not already said them much better, and with those eyes, how can I compete with that? Before I start, a few things. I am not trying to tell anyone how to feel. I am not trying to scold anyone. I do not believe we should stay silent if we've been hurt. I am not trying to defend Contrapoints. If I criticize certain actions and you didn't engage in them, I'm not talking about you. If I criticize certain actions and you did engage in them, my ultimate goal is not to criticize you, but to criticize the ways in which we are incentivized to behave. If you feel like I have done any of these things, I apologize. That is not my intention, and I will try to do better in the future if that is the case. Also, I know that Natalie Wynn, aka Contrapoints, has a history of, to put it lightly, rubbing parts of the trans community the wrong way. However, I was an egg for most of this, and so it feels a little weird for me to comment on it. For example, I had no problem with the aesthetic, but since I didn't, in a sense, experience it as a non-binary person, I don't feel right commenting on it now as a non-binary person, if that makes sense. So let's start with my feelings about everything that's happened recently. I'm going to do this fast, and I'm not going to recap everything. I'm going to assume that if you're watching my insignificant ass, you already know what's going on. Natalie's initial tweet I have no problem with. She was expressing how not having her gender assumed highlights her transness and makes her uncomfortable, and she even calls it a minor expense. Her follow-up tweets addressing the responses to the initial tweet are a bit more iffy. People who are trying to influence the culture to make room for us non-binary folks are not radical. Her referring to herself as the last of the old school transsexuals is a bit hyperbolic, but more importantly, transsexual is an outdated term that in its current form is used by some, mostly trans medicalists, to refer to trans folks who experience their transness in certain ways. It's gatekeepy, and it creates an unjustifiable hierarchy of transness. And while she is free to identify however she wants, given its connotations, she shouldn't use this term. Fuck Buck Angel. He is true scum. He was involved in a pyramid scheme to scam trans people. He outed Lana Wachowski as trans. Out of revenge, Lana Wachowski is one of the directors of The Matrix, in case you weren't aware of that. He really is a piece of shit, and Natalie should not have included him in her video. And even though it was not her idea to have Buck Angel in her video, to me, it strains credulity that she wasn't aware of at least some of this. Her radio silence on this wasn't good, but going after her friends was extremely shitty. those who were in the video were not aware that Buck Angel was also going to be in the video. So that's not on them. And it certainly wasn't on Lindsay Ellis, who wasn't even in the video at all. She was literally harassed just for being friends with Natalie, which is pretty fucked up. I took issue with Lindsay's response to this in ways I will not elaborate on, but I understand her frustration. The latest development in all this is what I really want to talk about. Natalie recently did a Patreon stream a few days ago where she addressed all this. You probably saw the transcript from it. Now, I wish that in this she had addressed the fucked up things that Buck Angel has done aside from just his very shitty tweets. And I wish that she hadn't come out and said that she's not going to distance herself from him. But I am not the boss of Natalie, and I have no interest in telling anyone what to do. Her stance with regards to this disappoints me, but it is what it is. Also, to me, it seems far more likely that Natalie was criticizing the cis people who act as though vocal support of trans folks constitutes allyship rather than criticizing H-Bomber Guy. She's aware of and even participated in the very important work that Harry has done. So this is a really uncharitable read of what she said. Also, they're literally friends. So as far as I'm concerned, this shit is between them. If you read the transcript, but didn't watch the video, you may be missing some important context. Natalie is visibly not in a good place right now. She was quite drunk during this stream. Now, she's never made a secret of her problems with alcohol. It seems, however, to be less of an issue since she transitioned, which makes sense. Now, this in no way excuses her decisions, but it contextualizes her emotional state. Natalie is being harmed by the discourse. This is patently obvious. This does not absolve her of the harm she has done, nor does it invalidate the very valid criticisms of her actions. But it does contextualize the effectiveness of that criticism. There are those inclined to dismiss the harm being done to Natalie, mostly due to her relatively privileged position in the trans community and the LeftTube community, and the amount of money she makes. None of these things mitigate that harm. Those who are minimizing the effects of her addiction are doing a thing that is indicative of a problem I see on the left. We're very aware of the systemic nature of marginalization when it comes to most groups. But there is still a tendency for us to treat addiction as a personal failing. I don't think this is consciously done. I think if you asked most leftists if they believe that addiction is a systemic problem rather than a personal one, most of them would respond, well, yeah, businesses are incentivized to create addicts. But we simply haven't internalized this, and in many instances, we take a liberal approach to addiction issues. Treating addiction as a personal failing is on par with treating obesity or depression as a personal failing, when more often than not, they are a symptom of the many, many forms of alienation we suffer in said system. If your reaction to this is to think that this harm is what Natalie deserves, you need to have a nice, hard think about your values. Because if your hope is that she corrects her behavior or learns a lesson. Her being done harm is not an effective way of achieving that goal. Punishment pretty much only serves to satisfy our desire for good old-fashioned revenge. So, what do? Every time something like this happens, I become more and more convinced that these platforms are not vehicles for achieving accountability. Twitter is and always shall be an outrage machine. Before we hit send tweet, before we hit publish video, we really need to consider what effect our work will have. We need to take into account the system we're feeding into and how that system feeds into us as well. And this applies even more so for people who have larger audiences. This is not me saying that we shouldn't express ourselves when we've been done harm. I think it's crucial that we do so, actually. But we try to understand the effects of the methods and tools of that expression. Otherwise, we run the risk of simply seeking catharsis, of seeking retribution. And all we will accomplish with that is more harm and no justice. Now, Natalie has decided to leave Twitter entirely, and I think this is a good thing. Like I said before, Twitter is an outrage machine. But I also think that she should consider taking some time off altogether. Not, and I repeat, not because it will appease her critics. The criticisms will remain. And not because she should be canceled or have a timeout or be put on the naughty step. I think she should take some time off for 3 reasons. The first is that time off is awesome. She works very hard, and everyone needs and deserves time off. 2, I am worried about her emotional state. I am genuinely concerned about her. It's pretty much what spurred me to make this video in the first place. I probably would have just continued to pretend like nothing was happening. Not because I stan her, but because she is a human being in pain and I care. And the third reason is I think that given all that's going on, she can't actually do the work that she wants to do. I was aware of Buck Angel before the Opulence video, but I missed his name in the credits. So when I finished watching that video, I was really hoping that the discourse coming out of it would be about her very good points, about how displays of wealth can be subversive acts for certain groups, and her very bad mischaracterization of Marxist class analysis. I mean, even though it was bad, it still left the door open for it to be discussed. Not all takes have to be good to be useful. I did not want to spend weeks talking about Buck Angel. And again, she should not have included him in that video. That's on her. But we're missing out on actually interesting conversations that we could be having right now. And I'm not sure she can just easily get her work back to the place it was before, and I really want her to. And I think that might just take time. I am not trying to defend Natalie Wynn. I am upset with her platforming True Scum, her unwillingness to acknowledge his shitty actions, her unwillingness to condemn him, and her casual method of sweeping his views under the rug by claiming that all trans people older than her are basically True Scum. But how this has been dealt with so far, is not working. It is only making a profoundly awful situation even worse. This has, time and again, made the discourse so frustrating and so tiring that a lot of us simply just shut off and try to pretend like it's not happening. And most importantly, nothing seems to change and no one seems to learn anything. And that's because, as valid as our criticisms are, we're critiquing individuals when the problem is capitalist competition brought to you by Twitter.com. Like Corvidae, I too worry about the next time this happens, because it will happen again. It may happen around Contrapoints. It may not. This is already being called the next Gamergate by people who are so profoundly ignorant that they can't tell the difference between a bunch of spoiled boys who just don't want to share their toys with girls and marginalized people voicing valid concerns. I understand that they are aesthetically similar because the structures are the same, because generating outrage is a thing these platforms do by design. Outrage and the reaction to it are so profitable. Whether we are leveling valid criticisms or harassing people, whether we are defending people or dismissing criticisms outright, if we're doing it on these platforms, all we are doing is lining pockets and causing harm. And that fucking sucks. What will be the discourse next time? Because I don't see it getting any better. I don't really have anything else to say on this. I am very tired. Natalie has caused harm, but I don't think she deserves to be harmed in return, because those aren't my values. Were we under a better system and using platforms that were designed to build communities rather than generate profits, I don't think this would even be an issue. But we are here. And it's unfortunately on us to try to find a better way to work through these things. Because this isn't working. And I just really felt the need to say that. Now I have. The comments should be fun. Cheers.